Games from the Cellar, the board gaming podcast. All right, so we're going to play Thunderstone. Yeah. Who's excited about Thunderstone?
I am very excited about Thunderstone. I am a little upset there's no donuts, but
Here's the question.
That's on me.
though, Mr. Capello.
Okay.
Thunderstone has had 2 or 3...
3 editions.
Okay. Which one is this?
This is the OG original Thunderstone.
Thunderstone.
Just Thunderstone.
And that's why the
Thunderstone.
box is so small.
Yeah.
No, the box is so small. This is all right. So this is just a standard 330 count deck box that you would use for baseball cards or bulk Magic cards, whatever. So the reason why this is in a small white box rather than the pretty art-filled regular retail boxes, and quite frankly, all of the expansion boxes, is because this is the set that was used in the 2010 World Thunderstone Championship at Gen Con.
Oh.
I ended up with the box ended up with the setup after we were done with the tournament because, quite frankly,
You stole it.
well, yes, I did steal it, I guess is one way of putting it. But I helped design this setup for the tournament, and we, as a group and all the players that were involved, agreed that this is one of the best setups for Thunderstone that they've ever played. So with these deck builder games such as Dominion, Thunderstone, the ones with a static marketplace rather than a market row, is if you don't take care in setting up a setup with synergies, or if you just do it completely random, you run the risk of having a setup that just does not work and makes the game awful. So for instance, with Thunderstone, you're building your deck not to just get points like in Dominion, but you're getting your points by going to the dungeon, which is a card row, and fighting monsters. And the monsters have resistances, they have little tricks that make it more difficult for them to be defeated, and if you don't have answers for those in the village, then the game can drag out. So like if half of your monsters are immune to magic and all you have is magic items and spells, then it makes the game difficult, and it's not fun with that. So what we did collectively as a group, we came up with this setup that has 3 or 4 or even 5 like different synergies and paths that you can kind of take to make a successful deck to navigate the dungeon. And having said that, when people play Thunderstone or Thunderstone Advance, I don't know if it works as well for Quest. What I tell people to do is take the first half and do that randomly, just to kind of get like a random setup. This way you're not falling into the same patterns, and then fill the other half with cards that are going to help synergize with the first half. That way you're not making just this unsolvable puzzle that is going to make you frustrated and hate the game. So that's what we have here. We have a very specifically curated setup that is designed to work at high level play and have multiple paths to victory. The thing about this particular setup as well, and this particular set of cards, this particular set of cards probably has 100 games on it. We ran the tournament with it. This was the final 2 tables, or the final 4 tables to come. We did 4 games, and then the last game was on this setup. And then with this setup, we continuously played this game throughout the rest of that Gen Con weekend. I mean, we were pulling it out in the hotel room. We were pulling it out at the restaurant. Well, not the restaurant, but at the bar that we were hanging out with. We were pulling it out just at the booth, because in between tournaments or in between events. We literally played this probably like 10 or 12 times a day over the 4 days. All right, so hundreds a bit much. Probably like 30 or 40 times we played this particular setup.
And this was back in 2009?
This was back in 2010.
2010,
so after
sorry.
the last.
So when was the last time you opened this particular box?
This particular box was last opened, I believe, in 2016.
Okay.
We played it. I know Cody and Jeremy were in on this game at a May Game-a-thon.
Dust poof when he opened it up.
So it's pretty clear that
so
since
then
they
that
have
was-
previous experience with this game, they're going to crush us, Chris.
No.
Well, that was probably the last time I played this.
I've played quite a bit of Thunderstone. I don't know if you can look up and say like when was the last time we played, because I think I really enjoy the game Thunderstone, but then Thunderstone Quest kind of bastardized it a little muddied it up.
It definitely took a lot of what I consider to be the charm of Thunderstone and tried to make it into a game that was more than what it actually should be. So they added these systems. They added a map where you're going from room to room, and you've got the scenarios where you play a very specific setup, and then once you win that game, you go to the next scenario, and maybe 3 or 4 cards change, but you're still playing the majority of the same cards. So it gives you a quote unquote narrative. It gives you an arc, whatever.
We changed the game into something that we didn't enjoy anymore, and it stopped coming out on the table.
Yeah, it made the setup a little more tedious. The games they felt almost the same game to game. Like there wasn't this high variance, which is what you expect out of deck builders like this.
Sounds like they railroaded.
Yeah, they kind of railroaded it.
Yeah, value of it.
It was one of those things where it's like, oh, we're going to add a campaign, and that's going to make it replayable. And then also, we're going to make it a campaign because that's going to give you that impulse to keep playing it,
To keep buying it.
to keep buying it. Quite frankly, because there's probably I don't know how many sets there are now. So the last logged play of Thunderstone, the original, was 2016. So what's that?
8 years.
Probably the last time I played this as well.
Last time we played, yeah.
Unless I happen to play a Thunderstone Quest.
So I mean, we did play Thunderstone quite a bit, and one of my fondest memories was when we were at Gen Con, and you could set up to go play in the big gaming area, and they had it. It was Thunderstone Extravaganza with donuts. And we get to this table.
Epic
and of course,
Thunderstone with donuts.
Epic Thunderstone with donuts. And we get to this table, and there's a couple boxes of donuts. We got our tickets. We sit down. We eat the donuts. They explain us how the game's going to work. And it was...
Shows that they know their audience.
Yes. But it was epic. I really enjoyed the game. Steven kind of thought it bastardized it a bit. But do you want to tell him how the game was set up?
Yeah, so early on... Dominion obviously came out, was huge hit, and then it was Thunderstone and Ascension came out pretty close after. And Ascension, instead of doing the static marketplace like Dominion did, it did a roving market row where each turn a different card would come up and you get variety, which whatever. And in Ascension, it works, that's fine. But in a game like Thunderstone, where you need to be able to build synergies and to build cohesive strategies to be able to be successful in the dungeon, it kind of, as they've said already, it kind of bastardized what I enjoyed the most about the game. Granted, yes, the Epic version. All right, so Epic version, basically you take all the village cards, you separate them into weapons, spells, and items, and you make piles that are each of those things so that you get to play with the entire set all at one time. I get why people want to do that. It's not the way I enjoy playing it. And the problem I have with it is, like, hey, I've got this hero that I really like, Flame, let's just say. Flame is a cool guy that basically turns light into magic attack. I got one of him, and I got a lot of light items, and I can do a lot of really cool things, but man, it would be real nice if I got a second one of these, because then I could be a little more efficient with how I do things. You just can't get that with the Epic variant. and I feel like it just detracts from how the game works.
I like the chaos that it kind of brought to it. Like,
Yeah.
okay, now it's a torch, and then the next one it was something else that was totally different.
Yeah.
Whereas when you play Thunderstone, it's a torch all the way to the bottom, and then the next pile, it's always what you're going to have. And this one, it just added that variety. And they did kind of the same thing with the heroes too. You didn't really know what you were getting into.
Yeah.
It added chaos to it, which I mean, we have played it. We did play it quite a bit, and that kind of I was like, wow, this kind of opened up the game for me and made it.
It was refreshing.
Yes.
Yeah, and I know another thing that people like about the Epic variant is it apparently makes setup and teardown a lot easier because basically you just take everything out of the box, throw it on the table, and you can go. So there is that part of it, but especially so. All right, and the other thing, if you're only playing with one box, I could get on board with that. But once you start adding in the expansions, there's just too many cards.
Do you remember who it was that ran the donuts with the Epic?
I think it was Brent Keith.
Yeah.
All he can remember is the donuts.
Well, there was the
Yeah.
donuts,
There,
but
there wasn't Mountain Dew.
But you know, I've had bad experiences.
BYOMD.
I've had bad experiences with Magic. Like it's the onslaught block. It's like I have no idea what that means. I'm trying to learn how to play this game. I came in during the onslaught block, and there was a card shop, and they gave me a really bad experience. But when we sat down with the guy from
AEG, yeah.
from
Brent,
AEG,
Brent Keith.
yeah, he was super nice. He had donuts, and he was super nice. I mean, he was just.
I think what's happening here is Chris really just likes donuts
Chris,
and
should I
not
DoorDash
really.
some donuts?
I was
That would be awesome.
How is he going to enjoy this game without donuts? Because I'm starting to think it's the donuts and not the game that he really
But, hey,
likes.
you know, if I
Yeah.
tie that in with my fond memories of Thunderstone, that's great. But I just wanted to say, if he does listen to this,
it was also Joe Babbitt.
yeah, Joe. Joe was who it was. That's who I remember.
I give the chocolate glazed a strong 7. You looked up the donuts?
I like that one. I've kept it in
Oh,
my
I mean, there's Dunkin'.
basement.
Yeah,
Boston cream.
but
Or a chocolate
yeah, Joe
cake.
was good people.
Or both.
And Joe actually was a co-designer on some of the later advanced Thunderstone Advance
And he
sets.
no longer works at AEG?
He was freelance.
But both of everybody that was running the thing was super nice about it. I really enjoyed all the people that we met from AEG at that time there.
Yeah, you know, when I used to work for him, it was a good crew of people. I mean, I'm sure it's a good crew of people now still, but I wouldn't have worked for him for 8 years had it not been a pleasant experience. When I was
And even you got me to work the night?
the
that
big
they-
game night.
The big game night. You got me
Maximum
to work that.
Throwdown.
Oh, never
With
want to hear
donuts.
or play that game again. It
Oh,
was a
we're
great
going to do
game.
that one for the podcast, too.
It was a nice game.
It'll be a
I'll play it for the
3-minute
podcast.
episode.
I'll play it for the podcast, but man, when you teach it like 15, 20 times, and it gets old real quick. So
All right, so I think we've waxed poetic enough about Thunderstone. How about we get into this and report back when we're done? Into the dungeon.
We got donuts.
And we played Thunderstone.
did we?
I played Thunderstone.
I also played Thunderstone.
I was
Good job,
present.
Jeremy. I'm very happy.
I was
I was
present for
successful.
Thunderstone.
I killed the Thunderstone dude.
You did?
The Guardian, the Thunderstone Guardian.
That's who I killed.
Yeah, so how didn't you win?
Him and his dumb horse.
I didn't win by a lot.
It's because he stole my pole arm.
I ate donuts.
And you did a good job, too.
Thank you for the donuts.
Chris-
Thank you for the donuts. Good.
Yeah, no problem. Chris won because he had donuts.
Yes. So I consider myself a winner, even though I didn't win.
Anyway, so Thunderstone, it's been a while. What does it still hold up?
Oh, I think it was a good game. I think I remembered too late that you don't want to have a huge deck.
Kind
And-
of how deck builders go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Culling is king.
It's figuring
I
out
didn't-
how to.
didn't pay attention until it was too late, and then by that point,
Yeah,
but I, mean, I feel like I did a decent
And with the
showing.
limited number of cards at the beginning, if everybody else manages to get to them before you do, that may be a non-recoverable error. So us playing only once every 8 years is a bit of a disadvantage.
Whoever remembers first is
Right.
Yeah. By the
Well.
time that I saw what Steven was doing, those cards were pretty much gone, or it felt like, wow, that's not going to come up for 3 or 4 turns for me now. Is it really going to be worth it? Let me just try and go to the dungeon. Let me try and get a hero.
What was curious is Steven, who eventually won the game, kept giving me advice to be helpful, and it turned out it was all awful. And I think that's why I lost.
Well, maybe you shouldn't be playing against him. You should have said, like, hey, I can be your squire.
You shouldn't.
I mean,
sit-
did you actually
shouldn't
take
go
the advice
right
I gave you?
beforehand.
I don't think that he did.
I mean, he
Just took your pole arm.
yeah.
You told me to get the ambrosia, and I managed to do that. But there was something else that you did, and by the time I got to the drill sergeant, I was toast because I got one of those. And when you got a deck of 60 cards, it
so
just doesn't matter.
that was the thing. So we were playing, and about quarter of the way through, I was like, "Oh, wait a minute, I'm doing this wrong. I remember now." So
rather than say, you know what, we need to grab drill sergeants, you very quietly just started taking them for yourself.
Well, I never said you needed to be taking anything. Y'all just kind of were watching what I was doing, and maybe it was the long play, and I was intentional. No, that's not what happened.
Well-
I had the first drill sergeant and just never was able to use it. It was just
Until we saw you on that one turn, we are like, oh, I'm going to play 2 drill sergeants and draw 4 more cards and get rid of other stuff. And so
buy
you were
this
doing,
level 3 and
Yeah, I mean, so the ambrosias are always a good buy because they're worth points at the end of the game.
Yes.
And they also enable all of your warriors and stuff to fight the monsters that are in the dungeon, because there were golems that required your heroes to have a
Strength of
certain
4 or
amount,
something like
certain
that.
number of strength. So the ambrosia is an important piece in that it gives you that strength. It's worth victory points. It also gives you attack per each person attack. So an ambrosia by itself could be worth a lot on it.
But I kind of feel like the ambrosia was kind of little. Hey, look at something shiny over here. Why
so
this is the real
other
magic.
part of it. That's the other part of it. The ambrosia costs 6, and the chances in the beginning of the game of you getting 6 money together is pretty slim. So generally, if you come up with 6 money, you should go ahead and take it, but you should really be focusing on the trader and the drill sergeants. The traders allowed you to upgrade your garbage cards into slightly better cards, and then into the best cards. And then the drill sergeant allowed you to call off your militia, and the drill sergeant allowed you to call off your militia and draw cards if you had a stockpile of experience points. And that works doubly so. Like, the drill sergeant's such a great card because, as the game goes along, you're getting rid of your militia, and it seems like they're becoming less and less useful. But at the same time, as the game goes on and the heroes start to go out, you're starting to accumulate piles of experience points. So later in the game, you get to use those. You get to use that ability to draw extra cards. So it's a good card that has a good early game use and a good late game use, and then it kind of shifts in the middle game. So
I kind of wish that at the end of the game we had counted up how many cards were in each other's deck.
Oh, we should have done that.
Glad we didn't.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure I won. I think I probably had about 60, so that meant it was taking me 10 turns to go through my deck.
Probably close.
I think that is exaggerating a little bit, but definitely
40, 42.
I definitely had less cards.
Were you
than most
getting
of you.
extra daggers and torches?
No, but I had like all 4 of the heroes.
He was buying level 1 heroes.
When never
When he had
leveling
nothing
them
else.
up.
Yeah,
when he
that's
had
why,
nothing else to do.
unfortunately, the later ones.
I will
popped up.
add, though, with the ambrosias, I'm the only one that used it for its other feature. Because no one else wanted to pick a fight with those
Well, we never had
things that killed fighters.
Yeah, so the ambrosia, its tertiary ability
I did it.
keeps your heroes alive when something in the dungeon wants to kill a hero. I remembered it. It just never was a... I only ever got 1 ambrosia for the first part of it. So when I was trying to kill it with my clerics and then drew a wood folk that is also a fighter, it caused an issue.
But then you took that 20 points of damage and moved farther into the dungeon.
Yeah. So, I mean, it worked out in my favor, one way or the other.
So if anybody Googles Donuts and Thunderstone, are they going to be able to see the deck that we played with, this competition deck? Or do you need to put it in the show
That was
notes?
epic. That was where they shuffled everything
Yeah,
together.
so this particular setup is on Board Game Geek in a thread. I can't remember what the name of the thread is. What I can do is I'll start a new thread. I do actually have 2 other threads on the Classic Thunderstone Board Game Geek forum that are 2 themed, like, pseudo story driven setups. Like, one I called the Barrowsdale Plague, because Barrowsdale is a town in this fictional setting that AEG has put together. and it has a couple special rules that the basic premise is there's a plague that's plaguing this village. There's an evil witch in the woods that's basically the root cause of this, and the village has requested the services of a bunch of clerics to come in and purge the witch. And all of the village piles have curses and diseases mixed in. So anytime you buy something from the village and a curse card comes up on top, you have to take that with you.
Ooh.
And so that emulates that the village is cursed.
But that's not what we were doing here.
No, we weren't doing that here. What I'm saying is, on Board Game Geek, you can find that. You can find another one that's the Ballad of Nigel Strong. That is a bunch of warriors with a bunch of big weapons going up against a bunch of really big monsters. So it's like the most epic, hardcore, like stabby, fighty beatdown of a setup that I was able to come up with for Thunderstone.
So what do you call this one?
So this one I think I have called the 2010 Gen Con World Championship setup.
Okay.
I was gonna say you mentioned that was where it was from, so you could probably find
Classic.
So that's what I'll label it as when I get off when I get home and can put it up.
Do you happen to remember what the scores were? Like the average, like was 40 a good score, or were you saying people score like 60 and 70?
No way I could remember that. That was nearly 20 years. No, that was nearly 10 years, 15 years ago. No, I mean the scores generally are like in the 30-35 range. Obviously, I had an advantage because I figured it out, and you had a deck where you weren't able to go into the dungeon as much. So points that you should have gotten, I ended up with.
Right. So if somebody had been like doing the same type thing with you, it would have been closer. It would have taken away one or two. Because
there are a static amount of victory points in the game, and so I think 30 points is a good benchmark for this particular setup.
I was there. I was at 20. I had 29.
And then also we were playing with 4 people.
Yeah,
5
per table.
Well, we played 5 here, but 4 per table at the championship.
At the championship,
in 2010, John.
It was 4 people per table. Sorry. But yeah, so just like I said, there were a lot of different synergies built into this particular setup. So you had the Torn, which is a warrior that can hold any number of weapons. So you had Curse Maces and Pole Arms. And Pole Arms, if you're really strong, they're even more powerful. So this is a guy that can strap up and walk in with like 5 different weapons if you draw it right, and basically have 40 attack and kill anything regardless of light.
I need no light.
I had another warrior that provided light, and then he got bonus attacks if there was extra light. So if he walked in carrying a lantern, he was just torching things. And they had 2 clerics that basically took care of all the curses and monsters in hand and things like that. So just, like I said, there was a lot of synergy in that particular setup that make it fun.
I like the setup. I want to play more. It brings back good memories of. I want to play more Thunderstone. Doesn't have to be this exact setup, but just want to see it come out more often.
Yeah, and this is the exact setup we played the last time, and it was also at a May Gaming Extravaganza. And it was Cody and Jeremy and Kevin and Samuel. So.
Hey, I wonder how I scored on that one.
Let me look that up. I can do that.
Yeah, I forgot just how to play deck builders partway through because I did not try any synergies. I was just kind of buying cards until I realized it was too late.
I can afford this. I can afford that.
And then as Steve was explaining the synergies that are there, I'm like, oh yeah, I just kind of went for a little bit of all of that, which is never good.
Yeah, you got to pick a strategy and stick with that, not overkill your deck like I did.
I don't know that anyone really went with like the Flame Guard and light as damage.
I started to, but then everyone else started buying, and so by the time I was able to start upgrading through them, I missed out on the level 2 guys and couldn't upgrade any of my level 1 guys anymore.
Right. Did the lantern have a gold? What was the gold value on
2.
the lantern?
Same
2?
as a torch.
Because that would have been good with the magic spell, that Silver
Storm.
Silver Storm.
It's a
magic
better
spell
torch.
did work.
So you
for
get the
me.
light, your flame guys, and the silver storm. So that way you go in there, you're getting basically both.
Yeah, I used that Silver Storm once, and I was like, "Oh, that's what
you
it
like-
does."
you
And
like
then
4 attack.
I bought like 3 more, and it helped greatly.
What did the silver storm did not have any gold
It
value?
Not on
didn't.
its
It
own.
just it was just you got extra magic attack for every like 2 gold that was showing.
And all the weapons had gold, and then all the monsters also have gold.
Yes.
So
Usually
it
get
could
like
turn
4
a
or 5.
it could turn a bad hand of drawing monsters into something that's useful. So back in 2016, when we played this last, Cody actually won with 26 points.
What? Well, I did a poor showing this time.
Just looking at all the
Wait a minute,
scores,
what
that
was
was
your
a
score?
19.
Yeah, so 7
got-
points is
I
not
got-
that
I
bad
got
of a
worse.
showing from what it took to win.
That's true.
So I mean,
Yeah,
you're a little
so-
rusty, but
We must have all been
The
a lot
scores
closer,
range from
though.
20 to 26.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we were playing deck builders a lot more back then. This was like the beginning of, this was the middle of 2016. So this was like right before my stats reset. So we probably have, probably a dozen games before I started.
Yeah, I think I'd played once or twice before that one.
plus we were playing Dominion a lot back then. I think
Minion was or the other versions of Thunderstone.
said my personal best was 39.
I can look too.
Yeah, what was the question? I'm sorry.
there was no question. He was just saying that his personal best was 39.
Yeah. So, it's actually been a while since I've played a deck builder on the table as well, because it's not really the type of game we gravitate towards these days.
It's funny. We've been playing a lot of cooperative games.
Campaign
seems.
games.
Campaign games and cooperative games have been kind of like the theme lately.
Yeah, and it's usually odd for us because those aren't games we typically gravitate towards. But I think the selection of campaign and cooperative games that we've been gravitating toward have been very thematic, which I do think is what we look for. So, as far as deck builders go, I feel like this is a pretty thematic one where Dominion is kind of, dry. You're building a duchy, you're having balls and whatever and ballrooms, and it's just
So somehow to me, Dominion feels more intuitive. I think there's more running gear here with light and with strength and
for
with
sure.
the pieces
I don't
together.
remember Dominion as well.
Dominion.
It's been a long time.
At least the beginning sets of Dominion, like the first 4 sets or so, it's very streamlined, and I think it was by design that way because
I agree.
my recollection is he had like the first 6 sets designed at the onset, and Rio Grande basically was like, let's find the easiest cards that you have and put those in the first set.
Yeah.
And
So I think the entry barrier to the game is much more straightforward. I think you could take your Aunt Edna and sit down with a game of Dominion, and she would sort of have the hang of it by the end. Whereas this, even with me having 8 or 9 games of this in my back pocket, and granted, the name Thunderstone applies to 3 or 4 different games at this point, it still takes me a fair amount of time to get the clock rolling again and get into how the pieces all work together. And it was handy having you sitting next to me waiting for your turn to come up, because you could coach me. You weren't, just coming off of your turn. You were to go next. But I don't recall with Dominion being that much of a challenge. So this is more of a gamer's game, more of a hobby game. Same basic concept. I just think it's going in 3 or 4 different dimensions instead of Dominion's 2.
But like deck building games aren't your first go-to, are they?
Not a bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's part of the issue there, too. It's like, okay, I like Dominion because it's very easy and intuitive. I mean, I think there was great theme on this one. Like, we're going into a dungeon, we're packing up and stuff. But
Yeah.
it's if it's not your game, then if it's not your bag, I guess, then it's not.
Yeah.
You're not going to find it as enjoyable as.
I think it's kind of hard to put any executive theme on a deck builder simply because there's no analog in the real world to getting those sorts of pieces all assembled together and culling out and that sort of thing. I mean, that's not, a race game is we're going from here to there and you go as fast as you can. And it's a little bit easier to get something thematically laid down on top of something like that. deck builders seem to me to be a game first, and then there's a
Whatever
thematic
thing's
aspect
based
thrown
on.
on top. Yeah.
Yeah. So to go back to your comparison, with Dominion, I agree that the first 3 sets or so of Dominion is a much lower entry barrier to entry. Mm-hmm. Some of the later sets are ridiculous, and even with as much...
Yeah, I probably haven't played them, to be honest with you.
Even with as much experience as I have with deck builders, I find them to be very difficult to play with.
Wait a minute, deck builders in general or Dominion? Okay.
Because Dominion's on iOS and Steam now, so you can go on and play. And if you play it on Steam, if I recall, they have like 2 sets a week that they kind of rotate in and out for free. And I went and played
Good to know.
I went and played the random setup of the week that they had put together against a bot even, and it destroyed me because I could not for the life of me understand how some of the cards interacted with each other.
Right, and the bot's going to know the combos.
Well, the bot's going to know the combos, and if you go up against an actual player that knows what's going on, you're going to get hosed too. But, I mean, even for me, with the experience that I have, it was just like, what is actually happening here?
I don't know, but it goes on forever.
So, I agree that the barrier to entry for Dominion is a lot lower in the beginning stages of Dominion, but I would be reticent to introduce somebody to Dominion with a lot of expansions over something like Thunderstone, if that makes sense. Cody, you got anything to say? You've been very
pretty
quiet.
because I don't have the history you guys have with Thunderstone. I've played it some. I'm also just not as well versed in deck builders, so I enjoy it. I'd keep playing it.
No.
Not more today, but
I mean, I could go
I'd
into
like to go into it more.
Yeah,
You'd like to try it again in another 8 years.
Definitely before 8 years have passed.
Yeah, sometime around
I'd like
2032.
to remember this play the next time I play it.
Is this game still available? I mean, is it something you can get on eBay or at like Games and Stuff?
Yeah, so
on Route 2.
I guess you.
Pasadena.
Yeah. Shout out Paul, Paul Butler, and crew, because he's got an amazing crew. I can't imagine that it would be very expensive to find because, Thunderstone Quest is now the new hot, shiny version, and people typically offload their old versions when they get the new versions.
So could you could you make this kind of version of Thunderstone out of what you have with Thunderstone Quest? Because, I mean, that adds that board and it adds a little bit more, but you have pretty much the same pieces,
if the
right?
cards are the same.
So I'd have to look. It's been a while since I've played Quest. I think that there are cards that specifically reference like the board or things like that might make it difficult, but you could probably come up with a list of cards that are compatible with like old school play, I guess you could say. It's like when we play Tomb, we have cards that we know are pitching under the box, and they're never going to see the light of day.
I don't think Chris knows that game.
Huh?
What game is that?
Oh, did I pitch the whole game under the box, and that's why it never sees the light
That's
of
why it
day?
never showed up.
Yeah.
I mean, I see it right over there.
But for something like this is, again, back to talking about purchasing used games. I get the feeling you could probably pick this up for $15 used.
Yeah, you can probably find this online.
Yeah.
I bet you could
because
get
it sold a lot of copies. I mean, it's
I bet you could get a complete collection for under $100, and I think it's either 5 or 6 expansions in the base set.
Yeah, and you don't need all of that.
And then I think there were 5 Thunderstone Advances. There was the Numenera one, which is like other RPG that Matt Forbeck. Is that his name, Matt Forbeck?
I have no clue.
All right.
I recognize the RPG name, but yeah.
Yeah, so there's an RPG that they did a collaboration with, and that's got some really weird rules too, because that RPG is actually kind of weird too, but I'm not going to disparage it at all. What does that
Is that the original?
That's the original.
$25.
$25. So it's available. I mean, it's very available.
And you really don't need all the expansions.
You don't need all the
play
expansions.
that one a few dozen times, and then maybe pick up an expansion.
So the base box for this is actually very strong. When I worked for AEG, for a long time I was convention support for AEG at Gen Con and Origins. And it was my job to sell Thunderstone, and I sold a lot of Thunderstone, and I played a lot of Thunderstone. I would sit in the con hall from like 10 in the morning to the time it closed, so
right?
like 5 o'clock, and all I would be doing is playing Thunderstone. I don't know how many times I've actually played Thunderstone. It's been a lot, but I sold a lot of Thunderstone. I sold, like, I would say 80% of the people that sat down on my table went over to the booth and went over to the register and picked up a copy. So,
and you're still willing to play Thunderstone.
I still love this game. It's like
you're still trying to sell it.
It's like it's like I was saying before. Like, we had the tournament, we played a bunch of games, and then I kept that setup, and we continued to play it through the course of that particular convention.
I know it's been a little while since we've been to conventions, but are they still doing Thunderstone tournaments?
Probably not.
Probably
to
not.
be honest, I don't think Quest really. I don't think it's. Yeah, I don't think it's.
Campaign.
It's more of a campaign game, so I don't know if it. They probably could if they wanted to, but they're because it's a Kickstarter only game. Also, like, they're not trying to sell it at retail, so why would they support it in that way? So, yeah. Anyone else got something? I've lost my train of thought already.
Maybe it's time to just go ahead with the ratings.
So, it's the time of the show where we give it a number. We use the Board Game Geek ratings. Thank you, everyone who nominated us for the Golden Geek Award. We obviously didn't get the nomination, but I appreciate everyone going and making the effort on our behalf. Maybe next year. Anyway, we're going to use the Board Game Geek ranking 1 to 10. Since I won, this is my game. Since I am probably the loudest mouthpiece and proponent for this game, I'll go first, and I'm going to give it a very resounding 7. This is one of the greatest games I've ever played. It's not one of the greatest games ever designed by any means, but I enjoy it every single time it hits the table. I would say that I suggest it all the time, but I don't, because there's just a lot of new stuff going on. But when this was like one of the staples in our collection, I was always trying to pull it out. And get it on the table and get it played. Thunderstone Advance, they're both really great games. I'm sure Quest is fine too. I've played it very little. If you see it on a used shelf, if you want to get it off the internet, I think it's great for anyone to give it a shot. Just don't go straight random. Put a little thought into your setup, and you should have a great time. Jeremy, I think you were next.
I'm going to put down my flame guard, and I'm going to equip that with a dagger. And look at that, it's a 7.
You got 7 attack?
I got 7, so I'll give it a 7.
All right, that's great.
Yeah. I like it. I enjoyed the... I haven't done as many deck buildings. I think the last thing I played was Dominion. But yeah, you guys mentioned it, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that game. I like it. So yeah, I like deck builders, and I like the theme, and it's different enough to keep my interest.
I think John was next.
Was that really?
I think so.
Well, there was a tie. You and I had the same amount of points, but since you killed the Thunderstone guy,
that was the tiebreaker.
That was a tiebreaker for me.
So it's a solid game. The thing I like about and I always get this feeling halfway through things like deck builders, anything where you're like kind of building the machine and making things run. Terraforming Mars is the same thing, in spite of being a radically different game. It's not like I care so much if I'm first, second, third, or fourth. I just want to see my thing work, and that you get that from this game. Is what I'm building? Is the deck doing what I want it to do? Am I getting the pieces out that I want and getting the pieces in? And so from that perspective, it's a fairly engaging game, even though it's not the kind of thing that I typically look to play. So it gets a solid 7 from me. It's a game that should be getting less, but it's not. It's getting more. So clearly, it's doing its job. And I think that's part of the reason I asked you, Stephen, how would they know this setup, is because I think anybody looking to play might want to say, well, if this is the setup you used for the convention because you thought it would work, that's the setup I want to start with. This is something I want to try out. Yeah. And once they get a little bit of experience with that, then at that point they can start making their own decks and start going off in their own direction.
Now, I will say there are some suggested setups in the rule books. I would suggest using those for your first few games, because they are very well balanced, and they make use of a lot of the cards in the set. So like if you get the base set, it's going to be it's obviously the base set, and they're going to work well together. But when you start adding the expansions, the suggested setups in the expansions will use enough of the expansion cards to give you a feeling of what the expansion is bringing to the game, and then it'll backfill with previous expansions and base set to make sure that it's a complete game without any holes in its strategy or tactility. Yes, I just made up a word. Congratulations.
Tactilitude.
Tactitionalitude. So I would suggest that if you're going to play, use the suggested setups, and then once you exhaust those, you can go to the internet and find them, or you should have enough familiarity with the cards that you can
start
build
doing your own thing. Yeah.
I'm kind of curious. Like, this isn't from the base set. This has got a couple expansion stuff.
This spans most of the sets. I think we tried our best to make sure there was at least one or two from each set.
Because that's what I remember. I mean, this one's nice, but there are lots of other synergistic cards that work well with each other. And it was kind of neat to find those, and everybody likes to take a different path. And I think this one maybe was a little too advanced for starting back up.
Yeah, I mean, it would have helped had when I was giving the explanation of all the cards, I remembered how it all worked, because I think I think that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like I did a pretty fair job of making sure that everyone kind of understood how all the cards worked and how they kind of worked together. I wasn't trying to hide anything so that I could win. I just was like, I wanted to make sure everyone had a good time.
I don't feel like you did hide anything.
And then, like I said, about halfway through, I was like, oh, wait, I messed up. And
you said that out loud.
Let's start over.
I figured out what's
I was like,
wrong.
oh, I figured out what I'm doing wrong. And then I kind of like made the adjustments, and I was like, yeah, these are actually really important.
Well, you just noticed like, oh crap, I do have a lot of cards in my deck. How am I? Oh, I'm supposed to use that card to get rid of them.
Yeah. So it's a combination of them. Yeah. Anyway. So.
Yeah.
Did you give us
if we were to play it again, it would be no, I have not. But if we played it again with the same set, I think it would definitely be more even keel with the scoring.
Yeah, like last time where it was everyone was in the 20-26 range instead of the 19 to 40 range.
Yeah. So, like Jeremy added up all his total, and I came up with a 9, but unfortunately I have 2 curses, so I give it a cursed 7.
A cursed 7?
Yeah, because I really want to give it higher, but because of the curses, I have to give it a 7.
I get it.
Yeah.
Cody, what do you got?
Did Chris have any other thoughts about it?
I mean, Chris usually concludes with his number.
That's true. Yeah, but because I was in last place. I really enjoy playing this. It was one of those, as I'm playing it, I'm remembering things about it, and so I'd like to play it again sooner to keep that in my head. I definitely thought I was onto something with the traders and the drill sergeants, and then I just never had them in the hand at the right time to use them well. And then at some point, my deck was just so bloated that nothing was going to happen.
Yeah, I think having those 2 monsters that killed our fighters,
it scared us
in the dungeon at the same time kind of stalled the game a little bit.
You're
bit
welcome.
the bullet on one of them. Yeah, you did finally kill one.
I killed both of them.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I got all my. So
You
I
got
got all my
ambrosia both
points.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I realized turn 1 I could have bought an ambrosia because I had all my money, and I didn't because I forgot how good it was. So things to know for the next time. But I'd give it's a fine 7. It's very well rounded. You've got a great set here that was very fun to play with, and I just am bad at synergies. But now I know.
I didn't give you the best. I didn't give you the best synergy strategy talk in the beginning, so that's my fault.
I was also out trying to get donuts for the first half.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah.
But you were very successful with that, so thank you very much.
Good job with the donuts.
Yeah.
Especially since you had to throw yourself in front of the car to make it stop.
Show them where I was.
All right, so that's Thunderstone. If you can find a copy, get it. It's a 15-year-old game, and
Pick it up used, get it on the cheap.
Still holds up.
Again, it's an easy purchase at that price.
the end.
As the HR representative at this table, you can't assume things. We don't have time for your sense of